Thanks, Maria.
Thanks.
Welcome, everyone. This is the third session of the speaker series that we're doing of the 5-part series on College Matters. And I'm looking for Maria, could you advance the slide? I cannot see the arrows. Thank you. The overall purpose of these sessions are to share strategies, practices, policies that help increase the number of institutes of higher education serving students with intellectual and developmental disabilities. This is based on the work we did in the first 2 years of the project. Next slide, please, Maria. The overall scope of work is 2 online learning modules. One is around making sure students with intellectual and developmental disabilities are better prepared for college and are aware that college is an option for them. And the second one is around students and family and professionals aware of the supports that are available in higher education to help them meet with success, in addition to this speaker series. Please, next slide, please. Folks, we are offering continuing education certificates at the close of this session and all subsequent sessions. So if you, we're asking people to stay on till the end and fill in the evaluation. Okay, now I
can put my headset in.
Super pleased to, if people could mute their lines, that would be most helpful. I'm really pleased to introduce Maria Paiewonsky. She is from the Institute for Community Inclusion and does work on ThinkCollege and is the principal investigator of a transition leadership course of study at UMass Boston. That really is looking at preparing rehab counselors, special educators, for example, as transition specialists in their in school districts. Maria?
Thank you very much for that introduction, Deborah. I appreciate that. Hi, everyone. You know, we have a big crowd today, and I so appreciate how many people are attending this presentation, because we are really hoping to have a conversation as well. And that is really why it's important to make sure that you're muted, only because the feedback can be kind of loud for people. So I am going to get started with this. This presentation is about how we can develop IEPs that are really supporting students that are preparing for college, students with intellectual and developmental disabilities and autism who are preparing for college. And that means really paying attention to those transition assessments, measurable post-secondary and annual goals, and the summary of performance, among other things. So this presentation is really going to be about how do we look at IEPs and tackle each section of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give you a little bit about my own background, very brief, a little bit about lessons learned and how we came to make these kinds of recommendations. So my first opportunity, though, is I would first like to, oh boy, I'm going to have to, oh, wait a minute, right here, excuse me. I'm going to start with, can everybody see the poll that we have? The first thing I want to know is just who is with us here today. So if you could just take a minute to identify to the, what is your primary role coming into this webinar today? And just going to see if we can get as many people as possible. This is going to be very helpful in just understanding who's interested in this topic, who relates to this topic. Oh, thank you so much. We're getting right up there. It's still moving, so I'm just going to give it a bit here. Okay, we're at 85% of you have responded. So let's see who we have here. Oh, we've got a real mix of people. We've got a real mix of who's attending, which is great because it takes all of us to actually get this IEP effective. So I'm really glad to see this nice mix of people that are here. All right, I'm going to stop sharing this and let's move on. So I just want to give you a little bit of background here on how we come to this. So as Deborah said, I provide training and technical assistance to ThinkCollege. ThinkCollege at this point is keeping track of the number of programs across the country that are being developed to support people with intellectual disabilities and autism to attend college. So as you can see, it is growing at this point, 305 programs. My focus of work, besides doing training and technical assistance for people across the country, is I'm also working with a small team of us in Massachusetts that are really trying to help people to not just prepare, as Deborah said, we are preparing transition specialists in training to carry on this work, but we also have what we call college-based transition services. So we're actually kind of moving students from schools into college even before they have exited school. All of that said, what has kind of come out of this is that we have been doing this since the really early 2000s. And along the way, we have learned an awful lot about what makes it successful for students and what we could be doing better in the elementary, middle school, and secondary age groups to better prepare students. So what this presentation is going to be, the beginning of this is going to be about, here are some of the lessons that we've learned that would help us to better prepare students. And then the second part of this is, and so how do we better prepare IEPs for students to make them as prepared as possible for this post-secondary ed experience? So how I'm going to start this is to say, okay, well, first of all, I can tell you that we do a lot of work right there on the college campus. Some of you know this, some of you are in the beginning of how to help prepare them for this. But we have done a lot of research with college program staff and special educators and parents and students collecting information about what this experience is, this college campus experience. And we know this is our actual real map from one of the colleges here in Massachusetts, but this would be similar to people in Florida and any other state you're in. Students are learning how to navigate the campus. They are inside the campus, they're using the dining center. They are accessing disability services. They are using the adaptive computer lab. They are having a free time at the student center. They are accessing academic strategies. There's a whole lot that they're doing. This is one piece of the puzzle here, and we have learned an awful lot about what students are expected to do, what they are struggling with, and how we could better prepare them. So what you see here is on the left-hand side is the college expectations for a student that is in attending college. And part of it is learning how to get to and from college. It's expected that you're going to be able to get to the college on your own and that you're also going to be able to navigate the campus. Some of these things are not as easy for students who have never really had anything except paid school transportation, getting them to school and back home. So one of the things already we can tell you as an example is the earlier you help students, even if they're entitled to that transportation, the more we can help students learn to use public transportation, the more access they're going to get to college. So that might be even starting with applying to see if they can use some ADA transportation, or building in opportunities for them to use public transportation before they even get to the campus. But it's also promoting times for them to move around the school on their own. As far as taking care of their own belongings, using their own money to buy lunch. These are all minor, little things, but important things, because these are all things that they can be doing at college and promoting their independence at college. So too with learning how to use academic strategies, something that's really important, that because they're asked, what kinds of accommodations are you used to? That's a tough question for students who really are not even aware of modifications that are being made for them. So the earlier we can get started on and helping them to adjust to accommodations, being aware of their disability and aware of what they can advocate for, the better. So that's one setting. Then there's, let's go a little deeper. Then there's that setting inside the classroom. And we know that there's a lot going on there. There's a lot of expectations, like following a syllabus, taking notes, being prepared for class, working with a classmate, all kinds of skills that are going on inside of a classroom. And this kind of expectation is different from what they might have had in their high school experience. So as an example, when you're in college, you're expected to communicate with the instructor on your own to either discuss challenge problems you're having, but also if you're running late or if you need to set up a time, that is for the student to do. Following a syllabus, a number of times students have said, I don't really even know what a syllabus is. Can't underestimate how important that is, that you take some time even in a secondary setting to use a syllabus to help them get used to being more independent, knowing what they need to do to be prepared for class. Things like taking notes. When they're in college, maybe they're going to be using a live scribe, or maybe they're going to have somebody who's going to do note taking with them, but they need to get used to that. That's not necessarily something that in a secondary setting they would understand. So we know that we need to do more with students to help them prepare for this academic setting. And then the other thing I'll just say is that learning management system, as we all know, better than ever right now, how important it is that college students know how to use that learning management system. And even before we were all sent home, basically, many classes have that Blackboard. They have some kind of a learning management system. The more we can do to help students prepare for that, the better. And there's ways that you can even use things like Schoology, which is something that they use in a K-12 setting. So that's something that we've understood we could be doing more to help them prepare for that kind of difference. Just briefly, I want to say too that a major shift then for students who are learning to use accommodations versus modifications is really knowing how to use some of the technology that the colleges use. One of the first experiences I had with schools and colleges partnering together was the colleges from the disability services orienting the secondary staff on what all of these technologies were. Some of them knew some of them, but not all of them. And that's something that can't underestimate how important it is for students to have a little bit of an orientation to some of the technologies, the software that they could be, that they were maybe entitled to use, they might be determined to be able to use in college, that they might not be aware of in high school. So And then finally, there's just the campus that, that part of being in college is having that freedom to kind of dictate your own schedule and having a campus life. But that means that we could be doing more to prepare students for knowing what to do with their free time and how to manage their free time and how to build it into their, instead of relying on other people telling them where they're going to go, what they're going to do. So there's more we can be doing to prepare them. Part of that is learning how to really use, not that a lot of students don't know how to use their smartphones, but to know how to manage their schedules with a smartphone. But also building in, what do you do with your free time? Instead of somebody telling you what to do, we could be helping students to kind of select that on their own, know how to use the fitness center, how to make a selection about a club you might be interested in. And also just getting involved in social activities. This is something that sometimes students get stuck with. They can figure out that they're supposed to go to a class and they are going to go to the dining center, but they might not know how to manage their
Whatever
other
you do, send
time.
something. Look for it immediately.
I think somebody needs to mute their line. Okay. Moving on now. So those are the settings. Those are some of our lessons learned. And now I'm going to move into that IEP. And so what this is really about is that when we look at the whole picture here of all the potential partners that are supporting students to make that shift, the one thing we know is it's the schools that are really, that's what they're paying attention to. They've got an IEP to write, and they want to be able to write it in such a way that it's going to prepare students for post-secondary ed, if that's their vision. And so sometimes we overlook how important that IEP is, but we know that that's our best tool so that the whole IEP team is prepared to help a student and uniformly focus on helping a student prepare for college. Now, one of the first places we might go with an IEP team is to say, well, working backwards, what is it we're going to try to do? And this is essentially a schedule of a college student, a first-year college student, a student who has a disability, so maybe checking in to disability services and getting accommodations. But you can see that, this really reflects a college schedule, not a secondary schedule. And this is a great way of kind of saying, how do we help prepare them? Even when we don't know exactly what the classes are yet, how do we prepare them for this kind of experience where they're learning to use public transportation to get there, taking public transportation from college, how to use the resources like the library and the fitness center and the student center, how to build in time for like a coffee break or time with your mentor, that we need time to build in for some kind of a job, and meeting with the ed coach, as well as taking classes. So sometimes I say, let's start with this. Let's just start with what a generic college schedule looks like. And then how do we work backwards on how to prepare a student for this experience? So most people, I think, are aware that one of the requirements for leaving school for a student with a disability is providing them with a summary of performance. And what I like to say is, why not start with the summary of performance? Instead of ending with a summary of performance, why not look at what we could be using, what information we could be starting to collect and share with a student that is collected for the summary of performance. There's lots of information that a student can gather from that, as well as how they're doing with each content area, what recommendations people have for them. But the thing that I like about the summary of performance is this part 3, which is the student's perspective. And when I look at those questions, I think, why wouldn't we start with questions like this with a student to help them think about the kind of self-determination skills they're going to need when they go to college? When you ask, How does your disability affect your schoolwork and school activities? Well, actually, that's one of the first questions that disability services, when you request accommodations, that's one of the questions that they might be asked. How does your disability affect your learning? So the more we can help students to answer that question, the better. Another question is, in the past, what supports have been tried by teachers or by you to help you succeed in school? Okay, on the college side, disability services questions, a question is, what supports have helped you to be successful in learning? C is very similar. What of these accommodations have worked best for you? And what's your best way of communicating and self-advocacy and study skills? These questions, I think, would be a perfect starting point. As opposed to this being a tool to use at the very end, a tool like this at the beginning would be a great way to start with students. So that's my pitch for the summary of performance. The summary of performance. Okay, before I go into the nitty-gritties of the IEP, I'm going to start another poll very quickly. I'm just interested in knowing what kind of a role you have right now with IEPs, if at all. I'm not sure if I added one for, maybe none at all, but just I'd love to know what your experience is right now with developing or contributing to IEPs. And in this one, I see that some of you are saying that, but I also said check all that apply. Okay, I will end this here. It looks like many of you are in some way contributing to either the individual transition plans or to helping to prepare students for, let me see if I'm not sure if I'm showing you the results yet. No. Okay. So many of you are helping students to prepare, and many of you are contributing to those individual transition plans. And then there are some of you that are really helping to gather at the vision. Some of you are contributing to transition assessments. And we have some people that actually are chairing those meetings and overseeing IEP development. So this is really good to know that many of you are touching on it. At least half of you have responded to this poll and are saying that in some way you're touching on the IEP. Okay, I am going to move on now. Okay, so how I always organize this discussion is to say, well, let's look at then what the Indicator 13 checklist says. What is the Office of Special Education Programs say is transition services? And thanks to NTAC, the National Technical Assistance Center on Transition, I think they have a new name now, but they put together this great checklist, which probably many of you know about, but it's a great checklist that just says, are we doing transition services? And if we do, how do we know that? Well, we know that because they've put this checklist together to say, well, that means that the IEP has measurable post-secondary goals that are updated annually, that we see evidence of transition assessments, that we see transition services laid out, that we can see some kind of a course of study that relates to their vision, that we have annual IEP goals that are aligned with those transition services needs. And the other two, student invite and agency invite with consent, I am not addressing specifically in this, but I am addressing these first 6 here because that's what we can see in the IEP. So First up, let's look at how we are connecting the indicator 13 checklist then to either college-bound or college-based transition services. Okay, so first of all, we need to have measurable post-secondary goals that are updated annually. And that means that we have goals that specify the student's plans. And how we usually see that is we'll see some evidence right there in the student vision and the student and family vision, like that some kind of futures planning discussion has gone on, and that as a result, we have a student's vision. We're going to see career interest surveys maybe have been completed, and that's how we know what a student's vision is. Or the student is at the meeting themselves and identifies for the team what their vision is. That we have students that know what kind of courses they want. And that we have people that are advising that student on how to take some steps in those goals. So that is one way, that is the first thing, is absolutely making sure right up front that we've got a vision. Some examples, and I can see it's 3:29. Okay, I want to make sure we have time for discussion, but at the same time, I want to make sure that I hit on the strongest points here. Some examples: Carmen will take college classes that will help her secure a graphic design or printing position at a print shop upon leaving school in June 2022. The important thing is, what is she going to do? Why does she want to do that? And by when? That's a measurable post-secondary goal. I've also put two other examples here: a student who wants to live in a dorm, get a job, and when he's going to leave school. Another one, he wants a job, he wants to live with roommates, he has a specific job he has in mind, and by when is he going to make that plan? So that's what makes this measurable and a post-secondary goal, meaning what are they they're saying that they want when they leave high school or when they transition out. Next, we want to make sure that students have transition assessments that really identify their strengths and interests and skills and the knowledge they need to reach their goals after school. So those transition assessments really need to be very much individualized for students related to their goals. That's the important pieces that they, we really have to avoid those transition assessments that are not customized or individualized for students. But the important thing too is that all IEP members can really be collaborating on the development of these transition assessments. So what you see here, let's go back to Carmen, Joseph, and Day. And what's different here is that we don't necessarily see generic transition assessments. We really, at this point, are seeing customized assessments for students. So I'm just going to take Carmen for a minute, who we already said she wants to go to college and she wants a job in a print shop. Well, we know if she's going to go to college, they're going to teach her, she's going to learn how to take a bus or some kind of transportation to the college. So there'll be a task analysis for her to figure out what skills she has for travel and what she needs to learn. What she needs to learn will be further assessed. That goes into the IEP. What about using accommodations to complete reading assignments? Okay, they're going to assess that. What does she already know? Where are the gaps? The gaps is information that will inform a goal, an annual goal. Her grades and assignments can also be used from, maybe she's taking an intro to graphic arts class in high school. Well, what kinds of grades is she getting in there? That's information that's going to help to inform that transition assessment. And the other one I'll use in this example is social skills, because not easy for students to go to college and kind of start again with developing relationships and friendships. Again, some kind of a social skills survey is going to help to inform what can we do to better prepare Carmen for that new experience being at college and making friends. Similarly, what I have here, and of course, everyone will get a copy of this PowerPoint, but what you see is how you're customizing and individualizing transition assessment and using tools that are really going to inform the IEP team how they're going to make plans for those students. This is just an example of many of the tools that transition specialists and special ed teachers and IEP teams are using when they're trying to help students prepare for college. You can find all of these on the ThinkCollege resource library. And also another one that I like is the Transition Coalition has a nice transition assessment library, many of them downloadable for free. So you'll also find some of those there as well. But this is, just a range. And what you'll notice is they're not all like generic transition assessment tools. These are really, can be used to really customize transition assessments. As far as transition services, what you want to start to look at is, and this can be kind of hard for IEP teams to say, because it does look a little different as you're starting to help them move. But what you can see is there's the role for the special ed teacher or the transition specialist who's kind of working on all of the goals with the student, related services staff, the OT, speech, PT, independent living, or AT, maybe they're working on the employment and the independent living skills. Assistive technology staff might be helping a student with all of those goals. Maybe if you have a career or employment specialist, they might be working specifically on the employment and training goals. And then maybe the general ed teacher might be working on the education. But that is a way to map out your transition services that honors FAPE and least restrictive environment, and is also coordinated, results-oriented, accounts for student preferences, and age-appropriate. You've got the student's vision, you've got the 3 areas that they're going to work on, and who's going to help. And that's the transition services. Again, going back to that, a course of study that meets the post-secondary goals. When you look at this, you can see like, okay, here's how we're aiming. We are helping, in this case, Carmen, to kind of right now, even when she's in high school, we can help her to learn how to use public transportation. In this case, it's every day. Maybe that's not the beginning. Maybe it's 1 day a week. She's going to learn to take public transportation and then build on that. In this case, they're helping her to find a class that she can take that's going to help her to inform. Is that really printing? Is that what you really want? If so, let's see if we can negotiate a class for you in your course of study at high school. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, maybe she has a job at a print shop where she's getting some experience, really understanding what the job is, and getting a chance to work with people that have her same interest. But that's the course of study that we're aiming for, a course of study that's giving her opportunities to work towards her post-secondary goals. The annual goals, these are just some examples of annual goals. And I'll just take, let's see, Carmen will during this school year, she will successfully complete 2 classes that relate to her interest in graphics and printing. Another one might be looking at the third one, promoting independence, that she's going to attend her classes, eat lunch in the cafeteria, and participate in 2 additional school activities each week, such as a club meeting, tutoring, or service learning. Again, that's not only kind of helping her to explore interests, but learning how to use her free time, which most college students will tell you they've got free time, and they sometimes don't know what to do with their free time on the campus. There's a number of resources that I just want to point out before I go further. I just want to point out that there's 3 really good resources that are on our ThinkCollege resource page. They're listed here, and they can really help IEPs, teams to kind of identify what some goals are once they've done some transition assessment. So you're not really starting from scratch, because there's people that are also thinking along these lines. And I highly recommend all of these resources for IEP teams that are really trying to develop effective IEPs for students. Now, finally, I just want to say there's lots of different ways that people are collecting data, which is also very important for IEP teams. There's lots of different ways that, especially when students are starting to actively pursue classes or independent travel, it's a great way to help students to collect some data and share it at their own IEP meetings. And that's what a lot of people look like. That's one of the ways that, one of the most ways that people are getting involved in IEPs is helping students to prepare for them, which is so great to hear. And these are some ways that people are helping, other IEP teams are helping and building in opportunities for students to collect data as well, to share with their team. But this doesn't have to be just students. This could also be a teaching assistant that's working with them, or an ed coach that's working with them. But there's all kinds of ways of using checklists, using apps such as your camera or your audio recorder. Sometimes people are using those at IEP meetings. It could also be a portfolio. But the data is so important in an IEP, and there's ways of kind of building in that into, and creative ways of using data as well. And then finally, I want to say that there's benchmarks that it can be used to kind of measure that using that data. An example is, it's kind of really measuring student progress. By blah, Carmen will meet with a teacher or guidance counselor in an advising meeting and self-advocate for at least one class of interest every quarter. Another one might be independently asking her teacher questions if she's unsure of expectations or needs in 4 to 5 targeted questions. That's a very specific and helpful one, because students are expected to be able to talk to their instructors or professors minus any other person. They have to be the ones that initiate a conversation. Can't overestimate how important just that would be in helping a student to learn how to communicate their own needs to a teacher, especially a general ed teacher that's going to equally reflect the kind of person that they have to talk to at college. One of the final things I want to say is, before I share 2 resources, is this is one of the tools that I was talking about. This was actually developed by a transition specialist here in Massachusetts, who then went on to work at a college supporting students with intellectual disabilities. And she developed this tool to say, and this is the kind of data she's sharing with IEP teams. So she works with like 4 or 5 school districts, and she is collecting this kind of data that she shares back with the IEP teams, and then the IEP teams can use this to develop new goals. So I'm just going to recommend this as one of the 3 tools that I'm highlighting that might be very helpful for IEP teams to kind of get at the specific kinds of skills that a student needs and how we can build on that back in the secondary setting. All right, 2 last things. I just want to highlight that my colleague and I, Ty Hansen, who's I think on this call, have of these resources called College-Based Transition Services. And what you see in here is, don't get fooled by this. It's actually, a lot of it is how to prepare secondary students for college, which is why I'm highlighting this page. It's right on the ThinkCollege page. And it's part of our Innovation Exchange section. So I highly recommend that for some of the resources that I may have talked about in here. And then the other resource I want to highlight for any of you that are parents or are working with parents, we have a section for families called Family Resources. And one section is just how to prepare for college. So I want to highlight that as a resource that I think would be helpful for people that are trying to prepare IEPs for students who want to go to college. My last poll, and I think we have some time. Let me just double check. 3:43. Yeah, we do. So let me just see if I could get some feedback on a discussion point that we could have for the last couple of minutes. I've put 3 here, but I also have left one for another one, wondering if anybody would like, would vote on a topic that we could spend a few minutes on based on this discussion today. And it doesn't mean that you have to talk, but even if you don't want to talk, what would you like to hear other people talking about? I'm going to give it another minute. And I appreciate you all contributing to this, because in a speaker series, this is what we're actually looking for, others to speak as well. Okay, we have 61% contributing to this. And let me just show you that overwhelmingly, it looks like the topic that got the most votes is the challenges and or the solutions that IEP teams face to effectively prepare students with IDD for post-secondary education. For example, post-secondary ed awareness, do they have the awareness that college is an option? Access to college advising or access to career-oriented classes are just a few. So I am going to stop sharing this. And I know, Deborah, you have a few wrap-up things, but I wonder if we could encourage people to speak up and talk about those challenges. Can anybody identify one? Now, come on, there's 21 people. I know I said some of you could listen, but.
Hi, I'm Audrey Vernick. I'd be happy to speak up if that's okay.
Audrey, thank you so much.
Sure. So I am both the parent of a 17-year-old with multiple and significant disabilities, and I'm also a patient and family advocate for children who have brain surgery for epilepsy. So I see it both in my work role and as a parent. And what I see is that there's a lot of checking the box. We did this, we're done. We did this, we're done. And there isn't really a meaningful connection to what's happening with this child once they leave high school. There isn't really, there might be steps in a plan, but there's very little follow through in seeing how that will actually apply. I've heard the child has both functional and academic needs. Well, we can only do one, pick one. Which one do you want? And not every parent has the bandwidth or knowledge to seek an attorney or even wants to go that route. But some parents are pushed into a corner where they really have no other option because the school is giving them such a limited selection of such a limited transition IEP by basically checking the limited boxes and then that's it. We've done our job, we're good. And I see this, I work nationwide, so I see this across the country. I'm in California, but I've looked at transition IEPs in at least 10 states. So this is not unique to any one district or any one state. But if you have any suggestions as to how to get a more meaningful and real outcome for these young people, I would be thrilled to hear it.
Does anybody want to contribute a response? Well, Audrey, first of all, I'll get started and I hope people will jump in. But I completely hear what you're saying. And I appreciate that you're not only speaking to your own experience, but you're saying like, I'm seeing this as a national problem here. And I think one of the things that I'm just going to talk as a person who's also training transition specialists to do this better, is that in an IEP team meeting, it's important to say, what's our starting point? It's like the person-centered plan. And what's our deadline? What's our mini deadline to get this done, that action plan? I don't know if all transition plans are written this way. In Massachusetts, we have a form that sort of says, this is what's going to be done. Who is going to do it? It doesn't have to just be school people, obviously, or just the IEP team, but it also can be outside of that. But then by when are we going to get that action plan done? And I think that's the thing that you're talking about partly, is that accountability for transition services. And that is one thing I can think of, is just some building in some more accountability for transition plans, which I think what you're saying, and which I hear a lot too, is that people just see it as like something to check off to do without any follow through. Does anybody else have any suggestions of things that have worked to kind of push transition services beyond the obligatory IEP or the paperwork? Oh, come on.
I'll add one comment. Recently on the ThinkCollege Facebook group, a parent wrote, who has a senior in high school, who said her student has not received any transition assessment or transition planning yet. And he's a senior in high school, and she didn't even know what she should ask for, if there should be goals or services in this child's IEP.
Wow.
And so that to me is just abhorrent that that's even happening. I know there's a lot of problems in IEPs in general, and I know there's COVID, but this was happening before COVID. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if there's even sort of a more national policy level action that needs to happen, because these kids are graduated and they're not prepared. I have parents whose kids turn 18 and they never got guardianship or any protections, and the child is hospitalized and they cannot go into the hospital to see that individual. Mm. They're not even notified of basic, those basic things. So we, in our advocacy org, that's one of the things we do, but it shouldn't be my responsibility to educate every family in our community to do that. There should be some ownership of that and some responsibility at the school site level.
Yeah. Does anybody want to comment on that?
Thank you for taking my comment. Sadly, I find this often that it's a big issue and there's not a lot of solutions, unfortunately. So maybe some bigger movement needs to happen.
Audrey, thank you very much. Anybody else? Even a comment about your experiences with IEPs?
My name is Martha Webster. I work for Dade County Public Schools as a placement specialist. And, just following up on what Audrey's saying, I think, like she said, maybe it is something that needs to be like a bigger movement. I don't know, but I do find, since I am actually in the schools, that the teachers just don't feel like they know where to find the resources or what exactly, which direction to point them in. It's not, it's like she said, they're very inundated with work, and they're doing like the minimal, boxes just to check off. And I just say I very much agree with that. And I just feel like it's kind of like there's not a solid direction.
Martha, thank you so much. I think you and Audrey are right that more attention needs to be brought to this. I think it's multi-level, as you're both saying too. It's supporting the teachers, but also informing teachers who might not have got this in their training. That's one piece of it. This accountability to transition services that really needs to be there. and really looking at those post-school outcomes. I mean, I think that's what, for us, working with students that are both in high school and then also in college, is we have learned so much about the opportunities for students with ID right now, post 18, are incredible. But if this is really going to work and be effective, we need to do a lot more to prepare them, right, in the elementary, middle school, and secondary settings. So I think you're both right.
Maria, I just wanted to mention that there are a few remarks in the chat that are just worth highlighting in case people haven't seen them already.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lyman. I see that we've got a number of people. Oh yes, person-centered transition planning from Jay Richardson Collins, who's saying there's been success with introducing families to person-centered transition planning from Maine, and the USIDs in Maine and New Hampshire. And I absolutely agree. I think that's that's our starting point. That's the starting point with all of our ThinkCollege initiatives as well. Denise is saying, in our area in Texas, we use a lot of person-centered planning and visual tools. Yes. Yeah. I mean, I definitely think that is, and the accountability for person-centered planning. I think that's what Martha and Audrey are also talking about. So I appreciate these contributions. And let's see, Carolyn is saying, perhaps the feeling of just checking off the boxes comes from a severe lack of resources within the schools. Schools I've had contacted with feeling understaffed and undersupported, not just equipped with programs that are needed to help students before COVID, and even worse at present with COVID. It's absolutely true. There aren't the built-in resources. The truth is, though, that sometimes the resources are one thing, and just better practices, a better approach to IEPs is another. But Denise, thank you so much for saying about students being involved in IEPs. It really does make a difference. And for all of us who know this, an IEP is a completely different experience when the student is in there speaking up for themselves, because I think more people that's why we're all in this field, right? We want to support young people to pursue their goals. And when you have a student right there asking you for that kind of help, it's hard to say no. Anybody else? So we've had some really good discussions so far about using person-centered planning and gathering that vision, and what are we going to do to big picture? How can we count on more accountability for effective IEPs and transition services? I appreciate this conversation. I'm gonna have to stop because I have to turn this back over to Deborah. I don't even know if I shared those results with you. I apologize that I didn't show you that was the #1 topic. And Deborah, are you ready for me to move on? Oh, by the way, thank you so much for your attention. I really appreciate this. I'd love to have another series on this. We could keep going.
Thank you, Maria.
Okay, this looks like it's my turn. This is Jamie, and we have on the screen there, and I've just put in the chat a link to our evaluation. Some of you may be familiar from attending our other sessions, but for others, if you simply want to copy and paste the link right into your search line on your laptop or computer, that will pull up our evaluation. It doesn't even take 5 minutes. It takes about a minute or two. It's extremely useful for us to get your feedback. One of the things we're doing is highlighting a particular practice and writing up a sort of how-to tip sheet on one practice and implementing it. So getting your feedback on what's most valuable to you will help to inform that for us. So I'm going to leave that open. And as you are submitting your evaluation responses, I will be getting notified. via my email. So we'll just starting to hear them come in. Okay, so we're just going to let that go for a little bit longer. And then Deborah will do some wrapping up, which will include some information about continuing education credits that people might be interested in receiving.
Thanks, Jamie.
Okay.
And thank you, Maria. What a content-packed session you've provided. It's a lot to take in, but all valuable information. And I would encourage, if people have questions, to let Jamie or you, Maria, know. Respond, reach out to you. The next speaker session is on Monday, April 5th at 3 p.m. And the topic's going to be around orienting students, parents, and professionals to what available supports, academic and campus supports, both disability specific and not necessarily disability related supports are available for students with intellectual and developmental disability who go to college. I think it's important to know that before, certainly once you get on campus, but hopefully way before. So that's the next session. I thank you all for attending today. I really want to encourage you to do the reach out to either Jamie or Maria if you have questions or want additional information, but specifically questions on the content, because it was so content rich. Hope to see you in April. Thank you all.